let's put all the disclaimers to bed and say, if an order comes in politically saying, go out and bring back, don't come back until you've got POK, right? Now, obviously, this is not going to be an army-specific operation, because we live in a world that where all warfare is hybrid. It functions at all levels. But I still hold that what Rajnath Singh has echoed, from many previous ministers and prime ministers who've said in the past as well, the impulse of POK coming back to India will involve the military as a catalyst. The military will not be the prime facilitator of that reclamation or that rejoining of POK with India. The real fight will be happening in POK itself. There will be a large people-led India-helped rebellion, which in many ways simply reaches a point where, for Pakistan, it's just no longer feasible. It completely spirals out of their control, and they are unable to do anything about it except send in their military. Manishankar Iyengar's problem has never been, speaking the reality or speaking, facts and things like that. His problem is timing.
Yes.
His problem is saying it right before an election. His problem is saying it, when it's already a hot topic or an issue. His problem is, Manishankar Iyengar is completely in love with himself, and he thinks he's an intellectual, giant, and that if he doesn't weigh in on India and Pakistan, the world will be incomplete.
Hello and welcome to the 24th episode of In Our Defense. We are right bang in the middle of the Grand Indian election, a topic I thought actually wouldn't come up during our chat, Shiv, in the lead up in the run, because I was actually hoping for In Our Defense to be this 1 hour of peace for us, the two of us, away from the daily routine of newsroom coverage, covering politics, covering speeches, covering rallies, etc., etc. But today it's going to come up actually, because the topic of our discussion has come up a lot in the run up to the elections. We are recording this on a Wednesday. 4 phases have been done and dusted, 3 more to go. We're right there. But before that, welcome. Hi, how are you? How was your week?
70% of the election done, and like I said, the end is finally in sight. So that's the only thing on my mind right now.
Right. So we'll talk about Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir, a topic that's come up a lot in the election.
And come up during the election campaign,
Campaign, exactly. And also there have been some protests going on. The protests, I think, now have been kind of called off. Like I said, we record on a Wednesday, and I think on Tuesday the protests were called off after some sort of agreement between the protesters and the government. The protests were mostly to do with high prices, food prices, electricity prices, etc., etc. Won't get into that. We'll talk about Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir. So in what context has it come up? Several ministers of the Modi government, Home Minister Amit Shah, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, Foreign Minister Jaishankar, and I think today it was also Assam Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma, have said that Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir is ours and we will take it back. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that statement. That's been, actually, it's a bit funny when people tend to be surprised with such statements, ye kya bol diya? Because just like, our previous episode, Israel-Palestine, just like India's position on Israel-Palestine, India's position on POK has been consistent throughout, all right? Throughout across governments, no matter headed by BJP or Congress, we have always said in parliament, outside parliament, that Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir is ours, and we have an obligation to take it back, right? But what I want to actually talk about is the practicality and whether it's even realistic to take POK back, but we'll get to that a bit later. First, I want to deviate from defense altogether and talk politics. We have many better experts in this building and outside, but since we both cover news on a daily basis, I think we are allowed to have our opinion as well. First, tell me, do you really think Pakistan, the topic of Pakistan, sells to the Indian voter in today's day and age? Because I've always thought it's very interesting that PM Modi in a recent interview said that, I've dealt with Pakistan.
Yeah.
Ho gaya, we don't have to worry about Pakistan because they can't even manage to get 2 plates of food on the table. So I don't have to worry about it. Yet you have his ministers, bring up Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir in rallies, in speeches, in interviews. Do you think, talking politics, that the issue of Pakistan is still alive, or is it just like, one last, ek aur cheez hai to ye bhi use ki?
See, I come from a school of thought that believes that Pakistan will always be an issue for Indians. Okay, you'd probably have to go forward another 2 or 3 generations for Pakistan to cease to be in our sort of mind space. You and I probably belong to that last generation where it's actually an emotive issue. When I talk to my daughter, for instance, who's now old enough to understand these things, there's not even a flicker of the same kind of sentiment or emotion that one feels when one talks about Pakistan. But Pakistan is a potent political juice as far as Indian elections are concerned. I don't think it has lost that potency. When the Prime Minister says, अब क्या करना है, जो करना था कर लिया हमने, एक घर में घुस के मारा, all that stuff has happened. But I want to there are two things I want to clarify before I answer your question, Dev. One, there is this fallacy, about the 2019 election where Balakot happened. Yes. And we've spoken extensively about what happened in Balakot. There are many political pundits who suggest that 2019 was a Balakot election. That because India attacked after Pulwama, India attacked Balakot, and suddenly the narrative badal gaya tha. It went from being a normal issue election to a mazboot neta, nationalism, patriotism, sabak sikhaya Pakistan ko type election. I'm very, very skeptical about that. Because I actually think that is a bit of a cowardly cop-out for what I believe was a pretty standard election being fought on various issues, most definitely on leadership and the image of Modi versus Rahul Gandhi. Rahul Gandhi had all but projected himself as the Prime Minister at that time. But I think the several failures of the opposition to really consolidate into a real challenge to Modi were explained away by political pundits as the Balakot effect. Since the Balakot thing happened, therefore the opposition didn't stand a chance, as if to suggest that without Balakot, the opposition stood a chance, which is, in my view, ridiculous. So that's one question, which kind of partially answers your question about the effect that Pakistan has in terms of the Indian psyche. My second answer is that Pakistan matters to voters in some parts of the country. There's Punjab. There's a northern, in places like Punjab, for instance, the Punjab factor matters enormously, because there it is, there it's not only because, there's a shared border, etc., but there are historical reasons why Pakistan continues to be an emotive issue. So obviously, politically and otherwise, sociologically, Pakistan is a very relevant issue as far as India is concerned. Finally, my final point is, there's a difference between talking about Pakistan and a difference between talking about POK.
Yes.
Totally different things. Two totally different things. Pakistan is the other, the enemy. We've shown them a lesson. They have tried to bleed us, and we've taught them a lesson using the Uri surgical strikes and Balakot. That's for political effect. POK is about what is rightfully India's. It's about articulating a sentiment that has literally been there from the time of independence. October 1947 is when the line of control was formed, after when POK was occupied by Pakistan at that point of time. So that sentiment is literally as old as this country for POK, and therefore expressing the will to bring POK back, rejoin POK with the rest of Kashmir and the rest of India is hardly new. We hear it every now and then in every election. This time it's become a little more voluble.
Yes.
Because you've got big ministers sort of saying it almost in a kind of organized fashion. Dr. Jaishankar, Rajnath Singh, Amit Shah, Himanta, like you said, they're all saying it. So it seems like people who hear it will wonder, is there something afoot? Is there some plan? I just want to remind everyone, we have an election going on. Okay, we will get into the practicality of these claims and these assertions. And remember, that not a single thing that any of these ministers have said is wrong.
Exactly.
They are completely 100% India's official stand as far as POK is concerned, and that is the reality of it. So let's differentiate those two things. But the practicality of executing it or letting it happen, is a different question. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. And we will get to that question. In fact, I'm going to get Shiv to do what he did a few episodes ago when you were talking about China, and he did this sort of wargaming scenario.
Oh, the invasion of Tibet.
Invasion of Tibet, yeah. So I'm going to get you to do that same thing for Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir. But before that, sure. So I get the reason why I prefer to begin with the politics of it, because the two are interlinked. So sure, I get the politics of it. I get, it's an emotive issue for a certain section of people, especially certain areas of northern India. But is the idea, or does occupying or reoccupying Pakistan-occupied Kashmir make any strategic sense? Let's again keep the practicality aside for now. We'll get to that, the reality of it. But strategically, in terms of when you look at the map of Jammu and Kashmir, when you look at the locations of Gilgit-Baltistan on the northern side, you have what Pakistan calls the Azad Jammu Kashmir on the left-hand side, western side. Does that area hold any value to us? Because an important bit that we need to remember is that this part that we're talking about, the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, technically speaking, physically was never with independent India. It was always part of the Jammu Kashmir princely state. When Pakistan invaded, the king of the time, Hari Singh, signed the instrument of accession, based on which India sent in troops, and then there was a war, then there was a UN-mandated ceasefire, which resulted in what we now know as the line of control, which was more or less formalized in the 71 Shimla Agreement after the 71 war. So India has never physically occupied Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. It's always Pakistan been there. So I would also see that place would have become very intertwined with Pakistan's establishment, with Pakistan's internal structures, whatever sort of governance you have, in terms of even culture to an extent.
Because in terms of even demography.
Demography, exactly. So does this place hold any strategic value to us apart from the emotive bit?
The harsh reality of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is that since 1947, the population percentage of Kashmiris there has shrunk to a single digit. It's between 8 and 9%, possibly less. A large part of the demographic in POK are other ethnicities from Pakistan, including Pakistani Punjab and elsewhere. If you ask about, let's keep aside the obvious answer, which is that the reason why POK should be part of India is because that's the right thing and that's the way it should be, and it's part of Kashmir, and therefore Kashmir is part of India, and there's no question this way or that way. But let's talk strictly about the strategic value, like you said. Enormous strategic value. For instance, with a whole Kashmir, which includes POK, India has a border with Afghanistan. India completely negates China's advantage in the northern areas, which it currently has access to. The Karakoram range, north of Siachen, etc., are places where India has been slightly at a disadvantage owing to China's occupation of Tibet. The Chinese access routes into Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, the northern areas, Gilgit-Baltistan area, and the rest of Pakistan via Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and the Gilgit-Baltistan areas would be completely negated, and these are very important routes for the Chinese. So therefore, it would be a strategic counter to things that China has been setting in stone for decades together. So it would be a huge blow to them if, let's theoretically assume that suddenly overnight POK has re-merged with India. So the strategic value is enormously there. The line of control ceases to exist. Your entire frontier becomes one big international border, which brings its own implications as far as international diplomacy are concerned, the United Nations are concerned, etc. Kashmir becomes whole as a state. It gives India an enormously higher standing in terms of talking for the people of Kashmir who are Indians, because the state is whole. India has taken actions regarding that state right from the beginning, and it has fought that fight right from the beginning. And the images that we see now in POK are, if you do a contrast of what's happening in POK and what's happening in Jammu and Kashmir right now, it's an incredible study in contrast, isn't it? Just look at what's happening in POK. Terrible parameters in terms of poverty, in terms of education, in terms of opportunity, in terms of virtually every growth indices or any other kind of index POK fares poorly compared to anywhere, but especially to Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir, especially post the abrogation of Article 370, when commerce and opportunity has been on a visible upswing in that particular place. So I think in terms of strategic value, it's a closed argument. This is something that India must have.
Right. Right. So let's get to the practicality of it. And then again, like I said, we'll do the whole wargaming bit. Great. Strategic value, yes. Emotive value, yes. But is it really even possible? Practically speaking, you have China. The way I see it, if India were to invade Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir, definitely the theory that the army has been talking about for a long time, two-front war, that'll definitely turn into reality. You will definitely have China reacting to it, because like you just described, China has huge investments in the area. The CPEC, China's flagship BRI project, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, passes through Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir, something that India has huge issues with, but can't really do much because that area is not really in our control. And also a slight interesting nugget, by the way, within the Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir, there is also a dispute between China and Pakistan, because of which Pakistan had ceded land.
There are many disputes in POK. Yeah.
That is Indian land to China, the Shaksam Valley, if I'm not wrong. Anyway. So you have the China threat. You also have the fact that the world would not look at India too kindly, even if they were not to intervene, because you have then India being sort of not a responsible player, not following agreements it has signed. Because of 1971 or 72, if I'm not wrong, Shimla Accord is pretty rock solid. And we're not China that, we sign something and then we just go back and be like, "Oye, humko to mara nahi tha." So practically speaking, militarily, I think it's pretty sure we can do it. And it's funny, whenever army chiefs are asked this question, they are like, we are ready and willing to do it. And people sort of, go gung-ho about it. I'm like, bhai, to army aur kya bolega? It's not like they'll be like, nahi, humse to nahi ho paega, sorry. So obviously army like, of course we can do it, But anyway, so militarily, I'm pretty sure we can do it. But practically speaking, if we were to do it, would India be able to survive the mess that would happen after?
So obviously this, and we're talking in very harsh simplicities, but there are 2 or 3 things to keep in mind when we even approach the subject of can we recover POK. Number one, India, Pakistan and China are all 3 nuclear armed countries. Yes. Okay, let's just keep that as the elephant in the room for a moment. When we're talking about a large-scale territory recovery operation of the kind that we are discussing in our defense today. B, under no circumstances and in nobody's imagination can the recovery of POK be a purely military enterprise or a smash-and-grab enterprise where, just brute strength and overwhelming odds in favor of India militarily or otherwise result in the territorial recovery of POK. It's not going to happen. Can the army mount an operation or the military mount an operation to recover POK? 100%. Like you said, not just because they have to say it, but because I'm sure they're capable of it. From 1947, the military has been in part training for precisely a kind of large-scale operation to recover POK. So let's make no mistake about that. It's not some pipe dream. It's very, very relevant to how the military acts, and should the opportunity present itself, perhaps there will be a large military element to this recovery. But something that the Rajnath Singh, the defense minister, said just a couple of days ago, I think in Lucknow, strikes me as being the very heart of it. He said, and Rajnath Singh is one of the more measured and thoughtful political voices over the last many years who've occupied the defense ministry. And he says we may not even need the military to recover POK. The implication of what he said is that the recovery may not be a military process at all. It may be a completely organic, internal mass rebellion that of the kind that took place in Bangladesh.
Yes.
The words left unsaid are, of course, rebellions that are have an Indian hand, or except the important thing to remember here is there's a stark difference between Bangladesh and POK. POK is Indian territory. So when we say Indian hand, remember that India treats the people of POK as Indian citizens. Yes. They are Indian citizens. They theoretically have Indian rights, right? So when you talk theoretically about an Indian hand in the protests over there are people. What do you mean Indian hand? We are their government. That's the Indian government stand. And therefore, whether it is the Jammu and Kashmir Awami Action Committee or the 3 or 4 other organizations that function in POK, the Pakistan government stand is that these are raw, raw funded organizations or Indian government sponsored organizations. My retort to that is, this is Indian territory. So, Indian agencies and Indian organizations will, provide succor and muscle and support to these organizations. India does not arm any of these organizations. There's no arming of any of these organizations. But are some of them sustained by India? For God's sake, it's Indian territory. It's not Bangladesh. It's not Balochistan. It's POK. It's Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir. It's formally Indian territory as far as India is concerned. And as far as many other countries is concerned as well.
Yes.
So the military aspect of recovery, in my view, is theoretical at best at this point of time, but never completely off the table because for 2 reasons. One, Pakistan in the last 7-8 years has deteriorated spectacularly on all fronts. Militarily, socially, commercially, and most importantly, economically. Nothing makes it's not the military that makes a country strong, it's your economy. Yes. There's only so much the military can achieve. The economy can take you to the moon, right? So Pakistan is a country that is completely crushed now, having to literally quell food protests in different parts of its provinces. Has runaway inflation of the kind that Pakistanis have never seen for generations, is a country that's on edge in the literal sense. It's really a country on edge where things are not going their way at all. And Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir has never been a governance priority for them. They always hope that you have a few puppet organizations there and things would run themselves. If things were running successfully in POK from the beginning, how could the Kashmiri demographic drop to a ridiculous single-digit figure of the population is anybody's guess. But like I said, a kind of theoretical hybrid practicality of this would have to be that POK implodes. It would have to politically, socially, commercially, economically implode. And that's the only way that then in that event, the military can move in and take power, something like that. But all of the caveats that I've mentioned at the start are applicable. You're talking about nuclear countries. You're talking about countries that have huge investments and interests in these areas, specifically Pakistan and China. So it's not going to be a smash and grab affair is what I'm going to say.
Yeah, which is why I think it makes it very close to impractical to actually do that, because China's invested, I think, at a level right now from which it's not going to walk back. Yeah. So I think what you were trying to mention earlier was that it wouldn't just be a military operation. It's like diplomatically you have to launch an offensive to convince China to let you do this. But China's never ever going to let you do it because they just have far, far too much at stake. Right. We'll talk more about Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir and an area closely linked to it, but after a quick break.
The thing with Gambhir, even in his time as captain, was the fact that he used to identify certain young players, push them to the till. Like you had a proper example was Surya Kumar Yadav, who he made his vice captain as well. So here you can see a guy like Harshit Rana bowling. He was given the opportunity to bowl against MI when Tilak Verma was there over Mitchell Stark. So that is the kind of thing that the team has kind of gotten in. So obviously Gambhir needs to be credited. And like how Ian Bishop said, I was very surprised that a commentator during another match, usually it is MS Dhoni did this, MI did this,
Virat did that.
But he just out of the blue, that even took everybody by surprise. He said, I have to talk about Shreyas Iyer's captaincy. And that is not something that I will take away from Shreyas Iyer at this point in time, because his captaincy has been great. Yes, there have been instances, probably the CSK game or the Punjab Kings game, where it should have been, the Punjab King game should have been won by KKR. that is the only instances where I could feel that, Shreyas did not get it right.
Yeah.
His batting is still off. That is something that he needs to take care of.
Yeah.
But his captaincy has been on point.
Welcome back. Shiv and I are discussing Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir. It's come up a lot in the election season in India, as it does almost before any election in India. And huge statements being made by some of the top Modi ministers, Amit Shah, Rajnath Singh, Dr. Jaishankar. All three of them, by the way, part of Cabinet Committee on Security.
Yeah.
So which is what makes this even a bit bigger, where they've basically said what has been India's position all along, that POK is ours, and we will take it back. We've talked about why it's an emotive issue for India. We've talked about the strategic value of that piece of that land, and how practically it's not that easy because you have vested interest in the form of China involved hugely over there. I slightly want to go from a slight different tangent to an area that's very close by, to an area which would actually get kind of sort of resolved if you had India occupying the whole of Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir, Siachen. Very often in the internet especially, people who don't understand strategy, which is why I wanted to talk about this, bemoan that, India itna paisa kharachta hai. So the numbers are around rupees 6 crore daily for the upkeep of the troops over there. It's around, I think, rupees 2,000 crore. Yeah, that's a huge amount. And even worse is around 20 to 30 deaths annually of soldiers, because very, very inhospitable avalanches. I think every couple of months you have news of an avalanche and soldiers being trapped, etc. I've seen documentaries, the famous videos of, eggs being rock solid, they having to use like hammer and something to break apart fruit. So yeah, people keep saying, kyun occupy kara? It's a very, very iconic operation. Both Pakistan and India were, I think, racing towards the top of Siachen because India had gotten intel that Pakistan would be trying to occupy Siachen. And I think there were fist fights at the top, and then India managed to control. India has been controlling since then. So if Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir were to be in India's position, I'm pretty sure Siachen would cease to matter, because Siachen is, I think, is a tri-junction. Yeah. You have China on the north, Pakistan, POK on the west, and India down south. So for those people who keep wondering ki India itna paisa kyun kharachta hai, we could build trains and better buses with this, can you tell us, in the current context, again looking at the map of Jammu and Kashmir, why does Siachen hold so much value to us?
So right off the bat, for people who are wondering about money being spent over there, etc., let me just say that the domination of Siachen was not and is not a pissing match between India and Pakistan. There are very real reasons why India did what it needed to do, because remember that in Siachen, unlike in many other places, India dominates. And when you say dominate in the context of mountain warfare, it means you're at a higher level and you're able to look down upon your adversary or your enemy. And unlike in many other parts of POK or elsewhere, in Siachen, there is the Indian positions on the Saltoro Ridge and the Siachen Glacier completely dominate all Pakistani points over there, to an extent that Pakistan is practically pinned down there. They cannot even move there. There's no hope of any kind of gain this way or that way in that area. Now remember that the Siachen Glacier, the line of control when it was delineated, when it was created, all the way back in 1947, it did not completely delineate the separation between India and Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir, including the northern areas, which meant that there was confusion and there was a lack of clarity of where the line of control went beyond point NJ 9482, if I'm not mistaken. And that basically could have either gone, according to Pakistan, that line should have gone northeastward, which would basically give Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir the Siachen Glacier. And India said, no, it goes due north towards the Karakoram Pass and K2, etc., Karakoram Pass. And therefore, the Siachen Glacier is on our side. Now, most people, perhaps don't know the fascinating story of how India finally, occupied, took position on the Siachen Glacier, which I'm sure we'll do a separate episode on, especially since we are now in the 40th year of Operation Meghdut. So 1984, April 4th, if I'm not mistaken, was the date on which Indian Army soldiers and officers dropped from their helicopters onto the Kumar Post, what became known as the Kumar Post, and began India's presence on the Siachen glacier. So you're right. Recovery of POK would end all these things about Siachen, but they would not end India's presence in those areas. India's presence in those areas would have to continue. Now let's assume that POK is back. Okay, we're taking big leaps here. With all the disclaimers and clarifications about whether something like this is even possible and realistic, etc., and all the applicable caveats. Let's assume in a ideal scenario that the world is stable, no nukes have been launched, and POK is back with India. That would not mean for a moment that the Indian army gets to climb down from its heights. It would still very much, be present at those heights. Perhaps not in the same kind of strength in the Siachen area itself, but in other heights. Those heights would move forward. You'd be nearer to the Karakoram Pass. You'd be in Gilgit, Baltistan. You'd be in those areas which have, borders with China-occupied Tibet or with Afghanistan, or indeed with Pakistan. So those positions would change. The geography would obviously change, but the nature of the warfare, the nature of the missions, those would not change at all.
Yeah. Another thing on things that would change, and I think we briefly talked about this in a previous episode, I forget which one, but the fact that the army is deployed along the LOC is because there is an LOC. If there was no LOC, there was just the international border, then you'd have the BSF deployed along the border. And I think we've discussed this, how even you feel that the army being at the LOC is just a waste, because the army should not technically guarding borders. It should be sort of a bit inland, training for war and etc. Since we've discussed the practical difficulties of actually taking back POK, we have to kind of more or less accept that the LOC is more or less going to be the de facto border. I mean, that's what even both the governments call it.
For now, yeah.
So then why do we still have the army deployed on the LOC? If you're treating it as a de facto border, is it because of infiltration, or do you think the BSF cannot manage infiltration? Why just not pull the army back and have the BSF take over the LOC?
Simply because de facto border doesn't mean border. It's really as simple as that. Also because Kashmir does not allow you the luxury of quibbling over, अच्छा de facto border है तो BSF को लगा दो. It's not like that. Kashmir is Jammu and Kashmir is a completely unique specimen state with issues, historical problems, threats that are entirely unique to it. The nature of its birth, the nature of accession, the fact that Pakistan continues to have an influence in Jammu and Kashmir in many ways through terrorism and infiltration. All of these mean that this is not a paramilitary specific threat. This is an international sovereignty threat. And therefore, that's what the army is for. That's the only reason the army is deployed there. Because the threat here is not just drugs coming over the border or a couple of drones bringing in some pistols. This is a war-waging machine of a large country, completely sort of almost racially committed to your destruction and the takeover of your sovereignty. It's as simple as that. And for that, you don't deploy the BSF. You deploy, and this is not to diss the BSF at all. The BSF does an amazing job in all parts of the country, as brave as any army soldier. All I'm saying is that the army is trained for a higher degree of defense and combat. That's all I'm saying.
Right. So let's get to that wargaming situation scenario. Of course, with lots and lots of disclaimers. I think we should ask Anna, a producer, to have like disclaimers running in red. Otherwise, you'll have people clipping like different parts and making a sensational video out of it. Not trying to sensationalize, because the reason I host this podcast is because of stuff like this, because this is a bit academic perhaps, but this is this is how basically you have military experts talking strategy, because this is like Shiv said earlier, this is definitely something the army has already the military has already wargamed, because this is a very real sort of a scenario for the military, because this is land of yours that has been occupied, on which you have complete rights, and so you definitely have a sort of a plan of how to go about doing it if you were to do it. So like we did with the episode on China and the idea of liberating Tibet, if there was a political message to the military that yes, go ahead and take POK, how do you envision that playing out on the ground in Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir, and also back in Delhi, when, like we said, India will have to also launch a diplomatic offensive to ensure that other countries do not get invested in that conflict.
So the disclaimer I'd like to make here before answering that is that such a situation is going to be virtually impossible. It's impossible that the recovery of POK is going to be an exclusively military affair, like I said in the past, simply because let's first remember that POK is geographically huge. It's not a small little. It's not a village or a beachhead or a mountain or a small patch of land that's being recovered. It's a huge place, as big as an Indian state. So if you're talking about a military operation, you're talking about a military operation of vast scale, country-sized scale. That's one of the challenges. For the sake of argument, since you've said let's put all the disclaimers to bed and say, if an order comes in politically saying go out and bring back, don't come back until you've got POK, right? Now, obviously, this is not going to be an army specific operation, because we live in a world that where all warfare is hybrid. It functions at all levels. Like we discussed in detail in one of our first episodes of this season, that the future war is going to have the military is going to be one jigsaw piece in any future war, but there will be many other aspects. There will be there will be cyber warfare. There will be economic attacks. There will be obviously be the diplomatic element to everything. But I still hold that what Rajnath Singh has echoed, from many previous ministers and prime ministers have said in the past as well, that the impulse of POK coming back to India will involve the military as a catalyst. The military will not be the prime facilitator of that reclamation or that rejoining of POK with India. The real fight will be happening in POK itself. There will be a large people-led, India-helped rebellion, which in many ways simply reaches a point where for Pakistan it's just no longer feasible. It completely spirals out of their control, and they are unable to do anything about it except send in their military. And once the Pakistani military moves in, because it's such a tense situation, then the Indian government has a casus belli, which is a cause for war. You're attacking my people with your military, which they are in a small way, but I mean in terms of a large scale conventional Pakistan military assault in POK because of the situation that's happening there, very much like in Bangladesh, except that this is Indian territory. Let me remind everyone again. And therefore, then the Indian government has a platform to declare war and push the military in. Then you've got what you said in your first question, that the military is fully prepared for this kind of thing. Then it goes out there and actually executes that. Now, if we want to get into the nuts and bolts of how it will execute that, I obviously am not a military commander, but very, very broad strokes, to use very, very broad strokes, there would necessarily have to be a large air power element. There would be waves and waves of air power usage to soften targets, to take out defenses, inside Pakistan and inside Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir. This is, of course, assuming no great resistance from their side. And let's for a moment assume that China doesn't get involved, because India has, for some reason, diplomatically conveyed to China that, sit this one out, and this is going to happen whether you like it or not. Okay, many leaps of faith in POK, believe me, and I've done this for many years. And then you've got most definitely the Navy playing a part, because in all conflict between India and Pakistan, the Navy does play a part, because of Mumbai, because of Kolkata, because of Karachi. India and Pakistan's economic hubs are all their coastal cities, and therefore that aspect would be there. And finally, the actual reclamation, the actual what Pakistan will call an occupation, which we will be calling the recovery of POK, would be a ground assault. A tremendous sort of overwhelming, eye-watering kind of ground assault, which strategically recovers all nodal points of POK and completely cuts off Pakistan, and sort of stops any future possibility of them gaining strength. And remember, a ground occupation means that India is basically institutionalizing that as part of Kashmir once again, which means that the army goes in, it probably doesn't come back out ever again.
Yes.
Or at least for the foreseeable future. It becomes a force that's holding POK in that case. Because you have to be realistic about it. It's not like, oh, okay, fine, we've got it now, we're going now. Now this is the border, please respect it. It's not like that. Obviously, it's not like that. Nothing works like that. So the real work would then start. And like I said, it's almost comical to make so many leaps of faith and suppositions about how Pakistan would react, how China would react, how even the United States would react, how Afghanistan would react, how Russia would react. We're assuming that none of these big tectonic shifts would happen. They would happen. All of these countries have interests in this region. Russia has interests. We're talking only about China. What about the US? US is a great friend of Pakistan. So are we assuming that just because we've got an alliance going with the United States, they'll sit pretty? In 1971, they didn't. They didn't sit pretty. They were right there to spook us in the Bay of Bengal. So India is in something like POK. India would be all alone, unless it really miraculously managed to build a kind of almost unreal international coalition that provided a kind of carte blanche to go in and get this done.
Yeah, that's quite the fantastic scenario. I mean, literally speaking, fantastic, because I think it is just fantastic. Will never ever happen. But that's that. And also, like you mentioned a couple of times on this episode, that you cannot forget the nuclear question. And then I think one of the Congress leaders, Jaishankar, got trolled recently because of an old video of his where he had said something similar. To be fair to him, I think if you look at his argument in the larger context, it did make sense that you have to keep in mind they have an atom, they have a nuclear bomb.
Oh, Jaishankar Ayer's
be scared of them.
Jaishankar, apart from his famous Chaiwala comment and a few other indiscreet and sneering, arrogant comments, I think when it comes to Pakistan, Jaishankar Ayer's problem has never been speaking the reality or speaking facts and things like that. His problem is timing.
Yes.
His problem is saying it right before an election. His problem is saying it when it's already a hot topic or an issue. His problem is Jaishankar Ayer is completely in love with himself. And he thinks he's an intellectual, giant. And that, if he doesn't weigh in on India and Pakistan, the world will be incomplete. And therefore, if the smallest, some boom podcast has, approached him with the greatest respect to all podcasts, and Jaishankar Ayer comes in and says, let's talk to everyone and give them all our gyan about Pakistan. So I'm just saying, his views are welcome. I'm just saying that he doesn't help his party. That's all.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. But yeah, so anyway, so that the nuclear question obviously has to be kept in mind, especially with China also involved. One last point as we end this episode, and this is to just talk about the POK issue. So, like we said, Jaishankar, he comes from a generation of, diplomats, and from a time when there was this resolute effort being made, both under the Vajpayee government and under the Manmohan Singh government, to sort this issue out, right? You had back channel talks happening, you had some summits planned or one that happened, some were planned, some were called up, etc. You also had the initial years of the Modi government where he made that famous stopover to meet and greet Nawaz Sharif on Christmas or his birthday, if I'm not wrong, on his birthday. And you had PM Modi in his first term inviting the entire neighborhood for his inauguration. Such a US way of saying it, but for his oath-taking ceremony. Yes. More Indian. Yeah. Right. But like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, in a recent interview, PM Modi has said कि यार हमने deal कर लिया है, and which, like you also explained, we have, after the surgical strikes, after the Pathankot. Was it Pathankot? Balakot and the surgical strikes. We've shown the message that if you cross the LOC and come attack us, we're going to hit you right back. Pakistan right now is in such dire straits that it cannot even think of doing something. It has to first fix its own self before it can think of launching another sort of pseudo war against India. So does this question then really need to get resolved? Because like we've discussed on this episode, POK occupying it is not really a practical solution. It's not going to happen. Okay, let's make that very clear. But the issue still remains then. LOC still remains, like we said. The de facto border still remains the de facto border. The army still remains on the LOC. Siachen still remains heavily militarized. So do we then need to resolve this issue at all? Or
That's actually a really, really good question. And I think the answer to the question is in the question itself, which is that India just needs to sort of watch Pakistan implode right now. Pakistan is caving in. For the longest time, for many years, people used to call Pakistan a failed state. And that was not strictly true. In the last 1.5 years, it's become true. People used to call Pakistan as failed state more as a kind of emotional response to Pakistan than the reality. Pakistan is a country. Pakistan is a fully functioning, government-led or military-led country with rules and courts and laws and it's not North Korea. It's a real country, right? And but it has become a failed state now, where the possibility of insurrection, the possibility of wide-scale civil unrest and civil war is not a possibility. It's a reality. It's happening in different parts of the country. So and none of this is or very little of this is India's doing. This is entirely on Pakistan's decisions. This is entirely on Pakistan's priorities. This is entirely on Pakistan's way of doing things as far as its government, its people, its economy, its decision making is concerned. This has nothing to do with India. As much as they'd love to say Ra agent for everything, this is not about India. So as far as skin in the game is concerned, all India really needs to do is let's see how much worse it gets there. We'll decide when we need to move in or do something, or when the time is optimal for us to get sort of directly involved in some kind of big shift in Pakistan. Until now, man, they're killing themselves. They're ruining themselves. They're imploding. They're a pile of crap right now. So there's nothing that India really needs to do. So I think that's what it is right now. When you say, do we really need to do anything? No, you're right. We don't. We just need to wait and watch the sad spectacle of Pakistan completely caving in and see where the ducks line up. At the end of this cycle of implosion of Pakistan, let's see where things finally end up, and then India can take a strategic decision on what it needs to do.
Yeah. And at the same time, I think kind of watch our backs, because I think I've expressed this worry once before as well, that with things reaching such a state in Pakistan, and you already have many bad elements there, both in and out of the military, by the way. And this is a country with some expensive weapons. Forget the nuclear weapons, even the normal weapons, because thanks to their old friend US, they have some very expensive weapons. So that worry always keeps coming to my mind whenever I hear such reports. What if this some piece of equipment falls in the wrong hands and something happens, and then you never know what happens. Right. And speaking of the protests in POK, I'm actually waiting for some outlet somewhere to do a story. Just when the elections were happening in India sent some raw agents over there to sort of.
It'll happen. I'm sure they're already saying it. Yeah, absolutely.
And they'll definitely link it to the statements made by the ministers. See, that's the whole conspiracy. That's the whole pattern. That'll definitely happen. Right. I think we ended there. Shorter episode than a normal chats, because I think the topic itself is such. I mean, if you were to do it in one sentence, just basically, can we retake POK? Yes. Is it practically possible? No. But yeah, I think Shiv explained the
never off the table.
Never off the table, yeah. But Shiv explained the complexities of it quite well, the operation, and for a change also made us understand the reason and the importance of POK and countering China, which actually would be a good strategy someday. If they are putting too much pressure on us over there, we can sort of start pressurizing.
Those are very much part of how the game works anyway. So
Right. So thanks, Shiv. Great chat. And thanks to our listeners and viewers as always. And do keep commenting. In fact, we have been flooded by idea requests. And I'm running, my list of idea bank has become longer and longer. And I'm just
it's going to be a long season beyond the elections.
Yeah. So we promise to get to each and every one of them. This one actually was not an idea by anyone of our listeners or readers, but viewers.
Based on the headlines.
But based on the headlines, we thought we'll do it, and we thought that you'd be interested in this. So if you were interested in this, do let us know in the comments below. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, do leave us a rating on whatever platform you're listening to us on. Thanks as always to our producer Anna Priyadarshini. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and do not cross any boundaries with your passport. Bye-bye.